Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video I wanted to do a build showcase on the Combat Medic. And the Combat Medic is a build that I used to run quite a lot. It was my favorite before Eclipse was added to the game. And it is a combat first, medic second build, but still a full-on medic. But it doesn't do any group buffs. It isn't based on future initiative. As always, I will use pictures from my build collection, and I will, as always, again, link everything down below, the collection itself, and also the build pictures that I'll be showing today. As with all of these build showcases, it will be split into two chapters. In the first chapter, I'll go into the build, how I've laid it out. This doesn't have a very specific layout. You can alter quite a lot about it to taste, basically. And I will also jump into a few numbers, just mostly comparing it to some of the other red builds, and just to show how much damage it does or doesn't do. And I'll also be discussing two variants of this, as I feel that will give you the insight to how you may want to alter it yourself once you have seen both. And in the second chapter, we'll go into some gameplay where I will, as always, live narrate and give you some insights to how I play it, how some of the tips and tricks for it, and try to basically give you the tools needed to run the build if you choose to make one. If I jump back into the game and actually introduce you to the build in the inventory, you can see that it is basically a red high-end build that has been recorded with yellows, and it has repair skills plastered throughout it. This is the variant that is with vigilance obliterate. In a moment, I will also show a glass variant that is more tuned towards dealing damage. But to discuss this one specifically first, we have two pieces of Providence and a piece of Seska. Both of them are here for their brand bonus of crit chance. So the two-piece Providence for that crit chance, and Seska for on the one piece. And we have a piece of Fenris because we are maining an AR, and we have a piece of Grupo as we want to. It is a crit chance, crit damage build, so a piece of Grupo fits in well here. The exotic of choice for this, and it is actually somewhat integral to the build, is the BTSU Data Glove, and I'll shorten that to BTSU Gloves. The BTSU Gloves are great for builds like this because, as you may have noticed, first off, we do not have any skill haste, and that would hamper a normal build quite a lot, except that we are using our hive basically as the main healing tool of this build. And as you can see here, this hive has a refill speed of 1 second, so 1 second per charge. Once it is in my inventory, it will fill up to full 36 charges in 36 seconds. So that is actually still quite fast, and we get that from the skill haste talent part of the BTSU Data Gloves, as they give 15 hive skill haste, so only skill haste to the hive per skill tier. And of course we have 6 skill tiers, so we have 5 on the gear itself, and then we have technician for a 6th. And yeah, with 6 skill tiers we have 90 skill haste for the hive. And that means that the hive is basically our primary healing tool. We will put it out and just have it cover our allies as much as it can and ourselves, and just use that as our primary tool. And then the chem, the reinforcer chem, is that I'll be calling healing chem from now on, is our secondary tool, just as to heal up even more for when it's needed. If people leave the hive range, as people will run around quite a lot. So it is a handy tool for that. And also we can use it to even add to our healing even while they are into the hive, and let people face tank. The exotic in the weapon slot is the capacitor, and the capacitor fits in really well with this build, as it gives, while we are wasting its skill damage part, as we do not have any skills here that are doing any skill damage, what we are mostly using it for is that it has this recoup of skill tiers to weapon damage. So for each skill tier, we gain 7.5 weapon damage. So for our 6 skill tiers, we basically get 3 red cores back. And together with the mods that the capacitor has in this 10 crit chance and especially this 30 crit damage, it makes it so that it is actually no other weapon in this slot would be a better damage dealer, especially on sustained damage, over this capacitor. And that's why we use the capacitor, even though we are going to basically waste part of its talent, so that skill damage part. And while you could, for instance, if you were to use this solo or something, keep the hive and then put in a drone or a turret, and then because it would be a 6 skill tier turret, because you have 6 skill tiers still, and the capacitor would input 60 skill damage into it, it would be a pretty decently strong turret actually. But for running solo, I personally wouldn't choose this, as I would much rather run something like a tech tank, which I do run as my solo builds. And that means that this is really what I mostly only use in groups, in the same way as basically what I run Eclipse as. And this used to be the build that I would run before Eclipse was added into the game. We would run 3 damage dealing builds, so usually 3 reds or maybe some hybrid or something in there as well, and then we would run it, and then one of us would run a combat medic, and then that got altered to basically be 3 damage dealing builds and an Eclipse. And mostly because an Eclipse, the CC, the Eclipse does basically more damage than this build, and the CC is actually more useful than healing people. But back when Eclipse did not exist, this used to be, well, my favorite build. It is very, at my core, I'm always very much a support player, but I also am decently good at outputting damage. So this is my halfway in between of being able to deal good damage and having the ability to support people. As you see as well, we have in the talent slots, we have damage talents, so we are basically giving no group buffs outside of the overcharge mechanic from BTSU. But what you could do as well is have some talents more geared towards buffing in case of Overwatch, for instance, or having empathic resolve. But I feel that I quite actually enjoy running this in this way, as the way that I play this is I play it mostly as a red build, and I try to keep an eye on everybody's health as well. And I basically, going into room, I will try to place my hive somewhere, play it mostly as a red build, use my chem if I see someone in danger. And that is actually the fun of this build, if I do use that 4-letter word for a second, is that it is actually quite challenging to try to play to its full strength, because I'm still playing it fully as a red build. At least I try to. And also I am trying to keep an awareness towards where my allies are and healing them. So I'm basically doing 2 roles at once, and that is its own fun. It is quite challenging if you try to, especially in the moments that it gets hard. This build actually does feel like a great rush to play, as you try to output damage a lot and you try to heal everybody still to full, and you have mechanics that you can use as well. The one mechanic that I really want to point out as well is that with the BTSU gloves, you can overcharge. You can overcharge by deconstructing the hive. And what is special about that specific overcharge is that it also, if you do it at skill tier 6, which we are, this build is at skill tier 6, you will apply it to all of your allies as well. I and people I usually play with, we used to call this supercharge, just to differentiate it. As overcharge is usually personal, so in the case of, you can also, for instance, have overclock or something and overcharge or that, or we have future perfect on this build as well, which we can use to overcharge ourselves. But just the call out of supercharge was what we would use just to let people know that they are overcharged now as well. So especially things like having a pulse in the group and having that be overcharged will give a pretty good damage buff once it is overcharged. People then also can use, for instance, their shield for that full 15 seconds that is overcharged is completely invincible, so they cannot lose their shield so they can face tank something for those 15 seconds if they want to with the shield. And a lot of the other skills as well will gain quite a lot of output, damage output, or ability to buff more and such. So yeah, this supercharge is actually one of the integral parts of this build, and is what makes this build actually a little bit more viable than just the damage numbers that it has. There's of course a trick that you can use, and I am aware of it, of using the BTSU gloves even at skill tier 1, which we would have just with the glove, or even skill tier 0 if that was possible without the glove, and getting to skill tier 6 first, and then throwing out another hive and overcharging everybody that way. So basically doing 2 overcharges and getting a supercharge as a second one. But here we don't need to do any shenanigans. We can just throw out our hive once it's getting low, deconstruct it, or once we start to get into trouble, overcharge it. And yes, once they receive that, they will go on a 120-second cooldown, so we can do that once every 2 minutes to the entire team. One thing I want to note down before we move on from the gear part is, well, first off, that you can see that I have 3 crit chance rolls, and especially if I bring up the build picture of this build and make it a little bit bigger, you can actually see I have what we need to get to this 58 crit chance that we have up here is the capacitor, 2-piece Providence, 1-piece Seska for another 20, the watch for another 10, so 30, 40, and then we need 3 rolls of crit chance, which I have here on the chest mod slot, on the mask mod slot, and on the backpack minor, and that altogether gets us to that 58 crit chance, which is quite acceptable. It is close to the cap, and you can see as well it is well, this build is on 149.9 because of this 11.9 mod, but it would end up as 150 if you use full-on mods. And yeah, 60 crit, well, 58 crit chance, 150 crit damage is respectable. Even though we are, of course, losing a little bit because we're a capacitor compared to a FAMAS. If you were to compare them directly, for instance, on a red build or something, capacitor is a lot less damage output, as especially it doesn't have a weapon damage talent. But in a second, I will show with the numbers that it's not as bad as it may seem. Because yes, we are giving up basically personal damage by quite a lot to gain that healing ability. And that healing ability is actually pretty strong. As you can see here on this one, we're healing for decent amounts, especially with the chem. We are healing more than a red build on just the burst healing of the healing chem. And yeah, that is actually quite valuable because you can just one tap and someone back to full, especially if they don't have a lot of armor cores. I also wanted to touch on that. Yeah, on the weapon slots, you see me have a Future Perfect on the secondary weapons, and Future Perfect is the talent that for in this case we will not be using the first part of it, which adds up to 3 skill tiers because we are at skill tier 6. But what it also does, if at skill tier 6, it grants an overcharge for 15 seconds. But this is a personal overcharge, so this is only to us, and we can basically use this from time to time to get a personal overcharge when we don't want to give a group overcharge with the hive, by deconstructing our hive because we want to keep healing going. We can use this to kill something and then gain a personal overcharge, which will increase our healing and such, give us a little bit more sustainability on our healing. And this build can kill with this weapon quite easily, especially something like a red. As long as I'm not competing with others, if I can single out a red, I can quite easily kill it with a secondary weapon. And for the pistol slot, you see me actually have double Future Perfect, and this is usually for when Pistolero is active, because for the rest I will likely not use the pistol at all. We are here locked into Technician. You could, if you wanted to variant it out, you could perhaps go Survivalist and add in one more yellow core and gain access especially to the, and that would be mostly not even just for the outgoing repair that Survivalist will give you, but mostly for that healing mine, as you can make a very strong healing mine in this way, the Healing Seeker. And Well, that is an option that gives up quite a lot of damage, because here we're using Technician and it's letting us keep a red core. It is, and that is quite valuable to us. And we are also still increasing our damage to, for instance, robotics and such. And you will see that me go for robots and stuff as well a lot, because I know I deal more damage to them than most. And also it gives us access to the Faraday, which we can make pretty effective use because we're using a hive. So when we place that hive, especially with BT2, I will place it within 5 meters against BT enemies, BT missions. I will place it within 5 meters of myself. So when a dog explodes or when there is jammer, then it doesn't apply to me. I can just ignore it. I will be immune from the shock and from the disrupt of all things. And that's, yeah, quite valuable. We gain access to the MP grenade, which is also a pretty decent tool. If we now jump so this was the first build the build as I've shown it here, which is with Obliterate and Vigilance. And if we jump over to the build that is with Glass, you can see here that I have basically, those 3 crit chance rolls have gone into places where I used to have repair skills. So I have lost 3 repair skills here, but I have gained crit damage for that, 3 crit chance rolls extra. And or a crit damage for, well, the crit chance has gone into the repair skills positions, and that has opened this up to have more crit damage on the build itself. As you can see as well in this upper right corner, that, yeah, this build has a lot more crit damage than the other one. And but it has given up repair skills for it. And that's basically a dance you can do on this build, which is how much crit damage do I want versus how much crit chance repair skills. How much repair skills versus crit damage do I want to have on this build? And yeah, you can move around with that. You could even give up several yellow cores and run Future Perfect, which is something that I used to do in the past. But I feel that it's enough of a challenge already just to keep an eye out on the capacitor itself, and then sometimes use Future Perfect and output that way. What this build as well has here, as you can see, it has Glass. And it's gone from Vigilance Obliterate to Vigilance Glass in this instance. And of course, Glass gives us a lot more output, as it is 30%, especially this is a perfect glass cannon. It's giving us 30% from the first shot, where Obliterate even needs to stack up to that 25% of it. And that 25% is additive to the Vigilance as well. So calculation-wise, it's basically an actual increase at full stacks of 20%, where this is 30%. So it's 10% more, and it's active from this very first shot, or whatever you do, basically. But you can see that our healing has gone down. It has gone down by quite a bit. So we've gone from healing a red build up to full with 3 hive charges to here with 4 hive charges, which is just 1 more. And you will notice that, at least I do notice that quite a lot in gameplay, because this just heals a little bit less, so you're using a little bit more charges, and then it runs out of charges a little bit more. But also it's doing more personal damage, so hopefully it's also killing through everything a lot faster, so you don't need to use as many charges. And the Glass is actually pretty fine, because what you can have is that you will heal yourself. You will be, if you do it right, you will be in your own hive range. And yeah, if you take a hit, you can actually heal yourself up. And layout wise, this is still again the same. It's 2 pieces of Providence, a Seska, Fenris, a Grupo, and then the BTSU data class. One thing I want to note on is Fox would, of course, would seem to be an option, but in both of these cases, with the amount of crit chance and crit damage that these have, Fox would actually be a decrease in damage output. It would be a tiny amount on the calculated version, but then of course damage to target side of cover isn't active all of the time, so it's actually a little bit more of a loss. And yeah, I've already calculated that out. If you were to lose even more, for instance, especially crit chance, or you would swap even more repair skills to have more crit chance, for instance, then you may be able to run a Fox in here and gain a damage increase from it. But honestly, I don't think you would reach those numbers without actually using a rifle, just from the top of my head. But as I will show in a second in the calculation sheets as well, you can use calculation sheets to calculate it out for yourself and for your specific build if you make a variant of this. Having rambled on long enough about the build layout, I feel I have touched on everything, except I will actually just quickly touch on the skill choices. So the hive is basically integral to the build. We need that for the BTSU gloves. And also it is basically our primary healing tool, because we also, from the BTSU gloves, we get that haste that is only for the hive. So the hive is actually, and we do not have any other haste except for our watch and this one roll on that is locked in on the gloves. But for the rest, we don't have any haste. So especially as you can see here, this healing chem is on a 24-second cooldown. On a FI build, for instance, on a just full healing FI build, this is down to in the 14-15 seconds, I believe. So this is actually getting charges a lot slower, a lot slower. And there's also, the chem will not be used as much as it is basically more of an emergency tool, even though we have 9 ammo for it. So we can actually at points splurge a little bit, and I will likely show that in combat. I will use this sometimes to let people basically face tank. As you can put several clouds down, you will get this damage over time stacked up, or this repair over time stacked up, and this cloud duration is the length that it stays on the ground. The other skills you could, of course, here use is, as I said, you could use something damaging, for instance, and then make use as well from the capacitor's damage, the skill damage part of it, the talent. But I personally just like running it as a full-on healer, as especially people will run out of your hive range, and it's quite frustrating, especially in random matchmaking. They will run out of your hive range, so you want to have a different tool as well to heal those kinds of people. There aren't actually many healing skills, of course, so what we have as well is the healing trap. And the healing trap is actually, well, a lot of people feel that this is basically a meme. It is, as you can see on this build, it heals more than per charge, it heals more than a red build. But and you can also place it down, and the smart players can then basically just walk into the charges themselves when they need one. Especially if you put it into a line of cover, basically, whenever they get hit, they just move to the side and hit another trap and heal themselves up that way. But a healing chem is just easier to use. The other option you have as well is the healing drone, but the healing drone, and it does heal quite a lot. It on this build is healing for 90k per second, and that is quite a lot. It will heal up someone up to full in 9-ish seconds. On a full red build. So that is both, but I feel that the chem launcher is basically easier to use, a more consistent tool as well. And as I said as well, the only other healing skill that remains is the Mender Seeker Mine, which is the healing seeker. And that one is locked to survivalist, and we really prefer to have technician. One thing I want to note on here as well is if you run this build a lot, my technician is actually set to skill damage, and I just always the perk of it, where you can make the choice between skill damage or skill repair or repair skill. I have it always set to skill damage, and I just keep it like that. Even when I'm running healing builds, I do not take the time to swap it out. So you could actually gain a little bit of healing if you run a build like this quite a lot. You could swap over to it. And if we now jump into a little bit of the numbers, as I have prepared a chart here. And if you do not know these yet, I actually have a video now up that will tell you how these work. And just to give a short introduction, if you do not want to watch that video, the numbers up here are coming from the stats down here. And they are color coded to match. So here the glass vigilance red that is here at the top is this top row of the stats here, and then it goes down like that. And the other thing that you need to know that is all of these percentages are comparing to this top row, which is this glass vigilance red. As you can see, I've prepared a Glass Vigilance Red, an Obliterate Vigilance Red, and an Unbreakable Vigilance Red, and these three are basically the old, still viable and quite effective high-end red builds. So these ones are with Three-Piece Providence, Grupo, Fenris, and Fox's Prayer as the layout, so without contractors, and that is just to keep complexity down, as we'll be using damage to health numbers here anyway, so they are even better off in this way. And their stats are here with a FAMAS, so the best burst and a very high sustain AR. What they don't have here is actually a weapon talent calculated in here as well. So they would actually as well gain a weapon talent on top of these burst and sustain numbers, because the combat medic is quite locked into that capacitor, and the capacitor is actually giving some of its bonuses in stats. So it's giving that extra crit damage from its mod, and it has that recouping of weapon damage from skill tiers. So the combat medics are basically locked into this because they already have their weapon talent basically locked in, but these would actually gain another 8% for instance, from strained. But just for comparison's sake and ease of use, I've kept it like this, but just to make sure that you do know that, because that is important. So these numbers are actually even a little bit lower than this. But still, you can see that, for instance, yeah, so the Glass Red is, if we take that as the baseline at the top, if we go to this Combat Medic, this first Combat Medic, which is the Obliterate variant, so the one that had more repair skill rolls and a little less crit damage, and the second one is the glass one that I showed. So it's those two variants and their numbers in here. The capacitor numbers are input here as well, so that is why these are purple, just to indicate that they are different from the FAMAS numbers, that they have been accounted for in that way. We can see that the Combat Medic one does around 56% of the Glass Red. If it also had for instance, strained, if the Glass Red had strained as well, this would be around 50-ish%. So it's doing about half of a glass. It's doing about 20% less than an unbreakable vigilance. And while those numbers are, of course, a lot lower, we are gaining something for that. We are not just throwing damage in the air, we're throwing damage in the air as healing. This is still quite a lot of damage. It is, especially if we go as well to the glass variant, we can see it's doing around 60%. So this would be even around 58-57% of the burst DPS of the Glass Red, and around 60% of the sustain of a Glass Red, well, 62-ish% of the sustain of a Glass Red. And yeah, those are lower numbers, but they are still more than enough to kill with. 3 million sustain DPS is more than enough to kill with, and actually do most of the content with. If you even just wanted to run them as red builds, this is enough to get through it. And of course, we have healing in return for that. And that's the strength of these. And that's also why I quite, even to this day, quite enjoy playing these, as they are builds that require a very specific playstyle. And yeah, you need to basically run them as a red build, shoot a lot, be shooting as much as a red build would, basically. And in the meanwhile, also healing. And that can be quite its own challenge. And I do quite enjoy running these, even to this day. Even though I feel there are more effective builds to be running, especially in a group setup. But it can be more fun for me. It can be more fun for my allies as well, as we're not basically steamrolling through, as I quite often will be, especially mission content, where I basically know all of the spawns and such, so I will make missions quite easy if I'm running Eclipse. Where with this, I do not have that option. I don't have that amount of strength, so I am still reliant on my allies. So they will need to do a lot more damage to keep the enemy numbers down. But I do get to heal them and play around with that, and give myself a challenge while doing it. And yeah, let's actually jump into some gameplay where I will show how I play this while I live narrate. So I'll join you in the loading screens in a second. Here I've accepted an invite for Viewpoint Museum. And as always, once we load in, the first thing I quite check, because I am on a support build once again, is what my allies are, as I'm quite dependent on them. And I will just look at their equipped skills, what their armor bars kind of look like. I will quickly heal them back up to full. We have bleed rounds active. We do not have the armor directive one active at the moment, so those two together are actually pretty annoying, as you get armor breaks and you also get the bleed rounds cause you to armor break quite a lot. Going to heal up that ally in the back. Going to stand in my own hive, just get myself healed up with that. And I'm going to actually quickly inspect my allies and see what they are. So we have a striker, but not in the best layout. We have another striker that is also not in the best layout. And we have a 3-piece headshot, 3-piece hotshot, that is a headshot build. And then that's going to be basically enough for us to go through this quite simple mission. And that's the thing with this build. It isn't actually a build that is there to carry or to actually output a ton of damage or do anything like that. It's mostly just for variation. It is a challenge to play well, and that's why I quite enjoy it. It is actually mentally, it takes its toll, especially if you play it for hours and hours, I feel. Especially as I like to really try to do both things well. What I often will try to do actually is out-damage some people in the group as well. So I will try to make it so that I basically beat someone, which is usually my goal. And of course that has become a lot harder, especially with these strikers here. So even a bad striker deals so much damage and is quite strong. And in that way it is hard to beat. Harder to beat than old reds used to be. As I quite often did used to beat normal reds, as I have pretty good knowledge of missions and such, and I would just use that to overcome my damage output discrepancies. As I also still quite often run purple builds and try to beat people in missions like that. And that's its own fun. It is, and while fun has been used so wrongly as to become a 4-letter word almost, it still applies from time to time. There are reasons to run builds for fun. Actually, if I use that second to tirade as well, is that, yeah, fun and good aren't on the same axis to me. I'm actually going to blow up that junction box, and I'm going to go back here real quick and open up this door for this ally, so the next time they run through here, they will actually have this door be opened. Once you have opened this door once, it will stay open for always, and that's kind of why I wanted to show this place real quickly. And I'm going to now run back and try to catch back up with my allies real quickly. Strangely enough, they've somewhat waited for me. I don't know. I do not know why. Just going to loot everything. I am quite low on resources, so I am quite desperate for getting some resources back. As yes, I've of course been trying to add a few builds to the build collection, with Ninja Bike having come in, and also Hotshot, of course, is going to get its own build slot pretty soon added in. I am already playing around with one of those builds, and once I have one that I feel is the better variation of it, I will add it to the build collection. We're pushing in, and this is the gameplay loop of this build. I toss out my hive somewhere, I get into cover pretty aggressively, hopefully also close to my hive, and then I just play it as a red build. And I try to just keep an eye out for where my allies are, where they set up, and if they get in trouble, I basically try to save them. I'm going to grab my hive and push up and put my hive down there. I see that one of my allies has gotten himself into some trouble, so I'm going to heal him back up to full. and kill like that. And that is the gameplay loop of this one. It isn't that hard, but especially trying to do healing well, especially when, for instance, harder rooms as, let's say, the boss fight of Tidal or something, there it can actually be a challenge to keep an eye on everyone, to deal good damage, and to try to kill and keep up basically with the red builds. We do heal up my ally. The one thing that, so it's kind of dependent on who you're playing with, is how aware they are of what a health gate is. And I've been using that term a lot, and actually somebody did point out that I should maybe explain it at some point. The health gate is that sliver of health that you remain on once you get hit. You will quite often get the feeling of like, oh, I survived on one health point, and you didn't. I mean, you did technically, but practically you basically took so much damage you would have actually gone down. But what saved you is that there's a mechanic of a health gate which will keep you at. I'm looking for my hair for a second. Has a mechanic of I'm going to toss my hive across, and that's going to be this place where I'm going to go set up, where once you reach a point where you would have died, you have taken that much health that you would have died, there's actually a gate at very low health, at like basically 0 health, that will keep a sliver of your health there, and we call it a gate because it's the same way as an audio gate would work. Basically, it needs a threshold to overcome, and after that is only when it will let other damage go through. The threshold here is just time. So for a few seconds, you're basically invulnerable, and after those few seconds wear off, the health gate has elapsed, and you can take the rest of the damage required for you to die. That ally is playing very aggressively. I'm trying to keep them up, but I kind of did, so good on me. I'm going to push up, put my hive here, and this is the position I'm going to take. And especially with this build, it's a lot about taking positions. I will basically lock myself into a position, and a centralized position mostly, and try to lock my allies. Going back to the health gate, so the health gate, once you reach that threshold, afterwards you can basically surpass it and then die. What it also does is that once you've used it up, it takes quite some time before it becomes active again. I'm trying to shoot the backpacks on these heavies and try to get them to blow up. I've got that one. These heavies are the dangerous targets here. I hear my hive going off. We haven't actually used that many charges. And also, this isn't the hardest mission. They spawn from the elevator as well behind us. Going to try to kill this Russia first. But what that time, so not the time that it takes that you're invincible, but the time before it resets and you basically have it again, is in that time, if you just take one hard hit, you basically go down. And you have to be aware of that, because my healing will not reset that. So if you take a sniper shot, that would have killed you basically, and your health gate saved you, and I healed you back up to full. If you stand back up and take another sniper shot, for instance from a dock, from a sniper dock, you will go down. There is no surviving that, and that's why you always see me call out basically my health gate and such, and that is because it is one of the strongest mechanics of the game. You have to actually know well how it works and make use of it, and especially with a healer in the team, it can be deceiving, especially if you're not well aware of how it works, because you will get hit in the head by a sniper. You think, oh, I survived on a sliver. You will stand back up and you will get healed by me, and then stand back up, and that second shot will instantly take you down, and you will not understand what is going on, and that is what was going on. So the health gate, once you hit health gate, you actually, even with a healer in the team, you actually have to still play it pretty safe. And as you see here, we're not going really fast. This isn't what Eclipse could do with a 4-man team of just killing real hard with itself as well. I'm going to see if I can get a grenade across just to get him out of that cover, but there wasn't a really good way to toss it across. But he still got out of cover eventually and died to my allies. One thing still alive.
Transmission control module.
I'm going to pick up my hive here and just get some few charges back on it. So in downtime, I will often grab it, put a few charges on it, and then toss it back out. Just recharge it a little bit. We do have Fog of War here, so we do not know exactly where they spawn, but quite often they will spawn where they did there, and we can just kill them. I see the heavy in the background. He's trying to... I'm going to actually kill this. So I have hit Health Gate, and I will go down there. The one thing that is important here is that once I go down, my hive actually does also disappear. I was trying to crawl to my other ally, but I should have actually not done that. And once he is actually up, I'm going to supercharge, and that's going to give him his hive back. Except that my hive ran out of charges before I could. So I'm going to supercharge here. Give him his hive back. I'm going to put out a few charges just in positions because my hive is of course on cooldown for a few seconds while it's getting a few charges. I'm going to put it back out again, and we're back in business. And that is one of the mechanics as well with that the supercharge. The supercharge gives everybody all of their hives revive hives back. It gives one charge back to the revive hive right away. So they can basically go down again if they need to. And that's quite strong, especially in 8-man, because then you can basically use the revive hive as basically just, I'll go down, but I don't care because my medic will overcharge every 2 minutes. And 2 minutes is 1 minute less than the normal recharge of the hive. So, and yeah, if you have the ability to go down every 2 minutes, that is actually, yeah, you will notice that lets you actually basically use that going down as a mechanic that you can use a lot more. I'm gonna go across there and get those drops. As I also actually now notice that, as always, speaking is impeding my ability to play well and actually pay attention to stuff, as I now notice that we do have actually two somewhat lower level SHC level players in our team, so I'll actually check stats, and if I get something good, I'll give that to them and get those resources as well. So up here is actually Jammer, and that's actually a good point for me to show how the Faraday mechanics work. The jammers actually have a gap always in between them, so you always, even that 10 reduction from just having the watch at full, that hazard protection, means that there's going to be a gap where I can actually put down the hive. And I'm going to do that and also use it to get Faraday going. So I'm going to pay attention to that bar. It goes down. I'm now Faradayed. The hive is giving me the Faraday effect, so I can actually still heal people. So when my allies push up to there and maybe they get hit, I can already heal them. Along the way as well, I'm going to give them another heal just in case they get a little bit further. Going to use a grenade there just to get stuff out of cover, but I threw it a little bit short. They have depleted the charge. I'm going to push back up. They're coming up this way, so I'm going to toss my hive over there. They're going to run into it, hopefully, and I don't actually see where my hive went. I'm going to deconstruct it, give everybody a supercharge, and just use it that way. And but with my hive gone, so my hive basically bugged out somewhere. It went somewhere underground, which hives have a tendency to quite often do. I'm going to put some healing on all of us, and put even more healing on the top of us. And here we can basically face tank. It's an overcharged healing, and it's two of them on top of each other. So my allies could quite easily face tank using that. Again, gonna go shoot the backpack of that heavy, and we are basically done with this mission once that engineer dies.
All right, the facility is ours.
And yeah, while I probably this didn't seem like a super overpowered build, which it isn't intended to be, and it never really was. It is a really fun support build. It's really there for people that enjoy playing support roles, as I often quite do. I'm actually and I'm going to now set up for a second piece of gameplay where we're going to take the glass version into a mission. And here is that glass variant. And as you can see, I've also went and grabbed my grade 20 capacitor, as I'm a little bit in a weirder situation than most because I do play 4 characters a lot, so I keep my graded weapons in my stash. I keep a variant of them in their stash, and I just grab it on the characters when I need them, basically. So I don't have one on each character, as, yeah, that would be too costly. As grading is still a little bit too expensive, but it's fine because it's meant to be really endgame content. For the rest of it, this build is basically the same. We just have glass now, so we take a lot more damage because, of course, our incoming damage is also amplified. But we also deal a ton more damage because glass is also active from the first shot. And also with the graded weapon and the crit damages that have come in here at the cost of a little bit of repair. But yeah, let's take this into a mission, and as always, I'm going to just quickly show how we do that, how we see where I'm headed to when I matchmake, and I do that again as always by going into matchmaking for a heroic mission, escaping back out, coming here into social, selecting their name, and seeing that we are headed to Potomac Event Center. I do not believe Potomac is invaded this week, so this is going to be the regular variant, and hopefully they are not far in. And as always, I'm going to check my allies' armor bars. We're at the very start. They're in the first room. Only Fog of War is active as a directive, and I'm just going to push in with my allies. I'm going to push actually a little bit further before I toss down my hive. I'm going to put my hive basically there, and then push into it. Are we at the end of it already, or is there one thing alive? Likely. Secure the area is still active, so something is still alive at the very least. I'm going to heal my ally up over there. The burst is going to be enough for how much they had, the amount of armor that they had. In a second, I will inspect my allies. One of them is likely, the one that just disconnected was likely a red, and he is. The other one is also red with the pestilence, and we have mortar build, but not in the best setup. And likely it's not in the best setup because they're expertising up ninja bikes, or ninja, yeah, the ninja bag, as we have taken to calling it. I'm going to let them open up with that mortar because that group is perfectly set up for it, even though they went a little bit long, so that's too bad, but we're going to just use these enemies to kill with. And as always, yeah, I'm putting my hive down somewhere. I'm going to push up actually here because we're a bit far back. And my ally actually, this ally with me is pushing up with me. So they are somewhat aware of my positioning. That leads me to, at least if they do it more often than once, that usually means they're actually aware of other people's positioning, which tells me that they are a player that will likely do good damage. It's hard to see in that in the explosions and fire and everything where enemies are sometimes. Neither of them is very low level, so I'm actually not that concerned about loot. I'm just going to grab everything as either junk or deconstruct on the ground. I am actually going to give another short inspect because I'm curious.
They must be waiting.
Okay, so that is actually set up to be a pestilence build,
Bring him in. Keep moving. You're almost there.
which can be useful. I don't know, it's good enough damage compared to some of the builds that you will see in matchmaking where it doesn't make any sense at all. That one just doesn't deal top level damage, but also it doesn't need to. Neither am I, so I don't get to complain when I am on a build that I'm playing mostly just for the challenge for myself, just for giving myself a little bit of a challenge. I don't get to complain when other people are also basically running builds that are off meta. And this is quite off meta. I would not, again, recommend this as if you want to carry hard it's more of a like the 7th build you make. It's a fun. It's trying to just maximize your output, maximize out your healing and such. Is it in itself its own fun, basically. But you also have to enjoy those kind of things. If you are the kind of player that is more than anything enjoys having high damage. I'm waiting for this rusher to actually push up a little bit. That's why I was waiting with shooting. I'm going to pick up my hive and use the wrong button actually there. Need to push up, put my healing again on my allies, pull up a little bit, and heal with them. And here is actually one of the places where I'm curious if I can beat the other red here.
You're almost at the dock,
As
Not too late.
depending on how well I play it, I should be able to. The mortar build, of course, is a different playstyle, and as such, it's not directly comparable. Going to grab the armor crate, the gear crate underneath here, as it gets often forgotten. Going to set up, wait. I'm waiting mostly for my mortar to open up, actually, as the person to open up. That voice line means that the spec spawn has happened already, but yeah, actually that one. Because I'm mostly concerned with these guys. My ally is getting healed by my hive. I hear the hive going off when they took damage, so that tells me that I don't have to look over, basically. And that's also a downside of Fog of War. One of the things that I, especially on a build like this, mostly miss when having Fog of War active isn't so much that you see where enemies are. What I miss the most is that I don't get to see where my allies are in relation to me in just a glance. Now I'm going to push up to this boat. I'm actually going to show one of the tricks that yeah, you should always use here is when this enemy comes out, I hit that, that is a disorient. That is more than enough time for me or any build to kill it. A lot of people go down there because they just try to face tank that enemy. Once you're on the gangplank, the position that he spawns, there isn't any cover really up there, so it is actually hard to deal with it. But yeah, you just deal with it like that. You have to wait for him to come out of the door though, so he needs to actually be through the door because otherwise he isn't going to be affected by it.
Shit. Agent Kelso's not responding.
And we're just gonna keep moving in.
Okay,
Hopefully in a second we will get a 4th player as well.
Target should still be inside. We have
And
to make sure he doesn't slip past us.
just gonna grab this weapon crate along the way. Yeah, that disconnect, that player finally got removed. Usually I don't quickly go move for a vote to kick or decline vote to kicks as well if they come in way too quickly. But yeah, sometimes people crash, you give them a few minutes to load back in. But the way that the system as well works is that you will not always get it to work like that. So even once they load back in, they may be not be able to get back into the session. I'm going to trigger it, just let's get started. Let's not take too long. As one of my allies was set up, the other ones weren't here. Were close enough that they can get into position. There is a pulse now, which that player has my thanks. As having awareness with a pulse, especially when Fog of War is active, is really handy. It still does not, of course, give me the awareness of where my allies are, but it's better than nothing. Here, actually, I will likely overcharge, as it is a good place to do so. This wave now spawns. I'm going to supercharge here, give that mortar player a lot of increase. I'm going to put 2 healings out on them. That is basically going to keep them, if they even take damage, they will be healed by those clouds underneath them. I hear something on my right, and I'm going to take care of that now. Going to put the healing here covering 2 of us, and then the rest I will heal with the chem if required. We have even not taken 1 shot in return yet. I am actually going to blow that up. I don't want shock rounds in play. If I was in Eclipse, I would be very pissed off at me for shooting shock rounds, as shock rounds can make content a lot easier on an Eclipse. Going to blow up that and him as well. And I believe that's likely the end of it, and giveaway is, yeah, that wave spawns. I wave spawned a little bit late, so I was still looking at the other side as well to see if there was something there. Going to grab these flame rounds in this Future Perfect rifle. So in this one, I'm running a rifle, and that's just to, well, I don't have any bonuses for rifles, so I'm not running a Fox or anything, but I'm still running it just to have a mix of weapon types, so that I can have the ammo for AR, and if I run out of ammo for the AR, I can swap over to the rifle. And even if it deals less damage, as it will, without an Overlord piece in there, where the Fox would be the choice for it, it deals more damage than an empty weapon. Also going to grab these ones in my pistol just in case. I will likely not use them, but they're still nice to have there as a panic button, basically. My allies have set up here, so I'll hive next to them, and I'll just join in the killing. And one of the things with, I'll show that in between, is that the capacitor is a 28 range weapon. So here we are likely already outside of optimal as well. It is a bit less than, for instance, let's call the M4s or a Mark 16 or a Carbine 7. It is quite a lot. All of those have 35 range. So this one has the same range as a FAMAS. For instance, and one more than a P416 from memory. And here we're just dealing good enough damage and just working our way through these enemies. And of course, this isn't a hard mission. This is one of the, again, the DC missions, and my allies are actually sticking in my hive range quite well, and we're not even taking return fire really, as we're CCing well. I'm not sure if I inspected that ally. He's a focus striker, which is a very high damage variant if played right. So yeah, we should be good on damage, because we basically have a red build, although even if it is a pestilence variant, a striker focus, which should deal top level damage basically, and one mortar to deal spread damage. I'm going to put my hive over there and hope my allies move into it. Basically going to shoot the backpack out, or try to on the backpack out on that guy. And this guy I should try to roll out, but sometimes lag disagrees with you. But I'm back to full health already, because my hive healed me back up to full. What I do have to be careful now with is, again, that health gate. So I have used up my health gate. So if I take one very hard hit, that would actually put me through to 0 health. Basically, I will actually go down from 1 hit. It will not be recharged quickly. And one of the things that is happening here, well, is that we're actually not even taking return damage. And that's also the reason why Eclipse has overtaken this one, for me at least, for damage output. Here I'm going to actually supercharge, give the mortar player a quite increased amount of damage, and he'll hopefully make good use of that for this wave, and then I'll have it basically at the end of the boss fight for the last wave of the boss fight as well. I'm going to try to hit him and get him to drop his grenade, and we've made our way through. If for instance, the Pulse player there, if he had actually also Pulse, so Pulse gets, once it's overcharged, it actually gains a mechanic where it will apply a damage debuff to enemies. So it's a memory 10%. I can actually check in a second while we're waiting for these doors to open and for the in between. So the Pulse has, in its overcharge mechanic, as you see here at the bottom, it has weakness exploit 15% actually. So yeah, 15% amplified damage bonus, and yeah, that's an extra flatline basically on top of on top of all your damage. As always with this mission, I will go on the upper left here. I can have a height advantage, which I always really like having. If I can have height, I will always go for height. And this side is the preferred side, because this side gets put on fire the last. It's the very last one to be set on fire. There, I was hoping that that fire would actually not be able to reach me. But it was. And we've gone through the first wave here. She was already dead once her backpack was on fire. One thing I'm gonna do here is try to time... well, actually, oh, that was way too soon because they need to still go. I'm going to toss it now, and hopefully that will catch most of this wave, and that will stagger all of the reds and purples. Not that this is really of a great value, but I'm going to actually go for this heavy, put some damage on him. I'm assuming that the mortar especially will take care of a lot of the smaller things. The mortar has been pushed out of position by that heavy, so I'm going to focus that heavy down mostly.
Vital signs critical.
I've taken quite a lot of damage here. I've hit health gate again, so I at this point I have to be aware and play it a little bit safer. That if I take one hard hit, I will go down from it. Now this side will also get set on fire, so I'm going to jump down, and hopefully my ally will get the hint from there. We do put my hive there. And I'm gonna try to do that trick again, where I try to get a jammer pulse. I'm going to go down here. That fire together with glass is more than enough to take me down. So once I was actually in range of that explosion, I was down. Nothing was going to save me. What I'm going to do here is actually toss out my hive, use it to supercharge. If I get it, and I do, heal there, heal here, and go to killing. I'm going to try and get the backpack on the boss, and that will deal a ton of damage to him and CC him. That enemy is trying to escape our kill zone, and we shall not let that happen. And I don't have the greatest shot here, but enough to kill him together with that ally. And we are out of combat, and we are done with this mission. So at this point, once that wave, the big waves spawn together with that LMG boss, that's the last few waves. We didn't have any low-level players. I would share this for the stats if there was one. It is not a useful piece, but what it is library, likely library fodder for them to feed to their library. Also, what I will show is actually Heki over there is going for it. There's a chest back here as well that scales after the mission completion. And I'm just going to grab those. What you saw here is this. I'm going to actually look at the damages as well. And you cannot look at this damage value because this is an outcast mission. And in outcast mission, this number will bug out. And that is weak points hitting weak points. So whenever you kill one of those elite rushers, especially of outcasts, and it damages other weak points that run into it, being attached to pouches and such from enemies, that will make this number basically explode out to what it is here, because there isn't this much damage. If you add all of these numbers together, there isn't this much damage as armor and health on the enemies in this side of this mission. But I just want to point that out. But what you can look at a little bit is what our kills are. And while you can, of course, pad more by going after red enemies more and such, but I wasn't doing that. And I've kept up with my allies. Of course, one of them joined late. The other one was a Pestilence and Explosion build. And so I've kept up, especially on a build that really shouldn't. And of course, that's down to me knowing all of the spawns and such and making good use of that kind of knowledge. And yeah, I will join you guys in a second in the conclusion to this video. And to conclude this video, I wanted to share my final thoughts on this build, its playstyle. And as you saw in the gameplay itself, it can deal decent enough damage. It isn't a full-blooded red. It isn't trying to be. Well, it is kind of trying to be, but it isn't the full intent because, yes, we could run a red build. But what it gives up in its damage, it gains back in its healing ability. And that is its own challenge on itself. As I feel when you are running an FI build, it can get boring quite quickly as you do not have many tools or things that you are keeping track of. You're mostly healing, you're applying a little bit of opportunistic, you're supercharging once or twice here and there. And also, in a 4-man, the group DPS is actually less than this build would add. So the buff of FI applying with the build damage output of that build, even though that's very low, together with 3 red players, is less than 3 red players together with this. But of course, there you're applying buffs to them, you're healing them. Here you are actually applying damage yourself and healing them, but not applying group buffs. So it is actually, they are comparable, but not instantly so, and especially against the red FI, which is also, of course, somewhat of competitiveness. A red FI is a lot more about dealing personal damage and giving that group buff. You heal here and there, but you don't actually have the availability to heal like this build does. And that is the differences between them. The red FI is a lot more about dealing damage and a group buff. This one is a lot more about dealing damage and healing. And that's what I really love about this build. It has stayed in several variants with me through a lot of gameplay. I used to have even more variants. Every character I used to have a variant of this, where now every character has a variant of Eclipse, because I do gravitate towards that now as my generalist build more, as my all-rounder build more. But this still has a place in my heart, and I have varianted it out in several dozen ways through the years. And you can as well, you can change talents, you can change how many yellow cores it has, and in that way also change from going from a capacitor to a future perfect weapons and stuff like that. So it is a very versatile build, and every time also that you change it, it basically changes the playstyle a little bit, so you have to relearn it, and that can be its own fun. As that is what this build is to me. It is fun. It is a challenge where I'm trying to heal people, deal a ton of damage myself, try to beat people as well from time to time in damage output, and meanwhile also healing. Basically a challenge run where I'm helping others and also myself and trying to do damage. And that's why it will always be one of the builds that I will recommend to specific players that are also into this kinds of playstyles, where they like playing supports, they like playing healers, but they also, in this game, of course, if you go full healer or full tank or full supports like that, there are very few builds that work that well that way, especially, for instance, full tanks don't really apply well to general gameplay in Division 2. But a build like this is more than effective enough to be ran, and I quite often do, and I get pretty good, decent results out of it, and with enough practice, I'm certain you can as well. And yeah, it is its own little beast that you have to tame, and that's why I will always gravitate towards this kind of builds. If you enjoyed this, more than anything, I would love a comment about what you did or didn't like, or what you would like to see changed, or which build from my build collection you would like to see in the future for a build showcase. For my next video, I will likely do a little video on some of the terminology that we use in the game and what it kind of means, and why, to basically give you my philosophy and my worldview on those kinds of things, because I know that it isn't the general one, but I know a lot of people share my views, and just to basically set the table to so that you know what I mean for some of the words that I use. And after that, also, I'm working in the background on another build masterclass. And I hope you will join me for those. Have a good night.